Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Carlizon, Principal Editor of NPP Digital Psychiatry and Neuroscience. Welcome to the DPN Deep Dive, our journal's AI-generated podcast that summarizes DPN articles in short, accessible episodes. Each episode is approved by the authors and designed to make listening easy and fun. Let's dive into this episode to explore the latest research in digital psychiatry and neuroscience.
So when we're all relying on science to solve these, huge global health crises, shouldn't we pay really close attention to who is actually doing the research? Today, we're doing a deep dive into an article that focuses on a group that is, absolutely critical to the future of psychiatry. Researchers who have lived experience with serious mental illness or substance use disorders.
Right. And these individuals bring what the article calls a critical dual expertise.
Dual expertise. Okay.
Yeah. So they have the rigorous scientific training you need for psychiatric neuroscience, but they also have this profound experiential knowledge. I mean, they've actually navigated the very conditions they're studying.
And what's really shocking is just how rare that perspective is.
It's staggering. Despite how common psychiatric conditions are, people with disabilities make up only about, 3% of the entire STEM workforce?
Wow.
The authors argue that in a field like ours, ignoring that lived expertise, it's not just a moral oversight, it's a scientific drain.
And the article's mission is really clear then. It's to expose these systemic barriers and also to reframe their personal history.
Exactly. To move it away from being seen as a liability.
And treat it as a core source of scientific strength. Okay, so let's unpack the biggest roadblocks they identified.
The primary hurdle is the pervasive, really entrenched stigma. It makes disclosure a very high-risk gamble.
The gamble.
Yeah, the sources detail how trainees are told, warned, that revealing a psychiatric history can be career-limiting.
That's why they call it the kiss of death in grad school admissions, right?
That's the tragic phrase, yes. And it forces people into this impossible paradox. You risk discrimination if you disclose, but if you don't, you could face penalties later. You're sort of trapped.
But hold on. Why do they face this kind of skepticism when researchers in other fields don't? I mean, we all hear these inspiring stories about, say, a cancer researcher who's also a survivor. That's seen as an asset.
And that's the striking contrast. In psychiatric neuroscience, that personal experience often runs right into these stereotypes rooted in ableism.
So they're seen as what? Unreliable.
Unreliable, too close to the subject, or somehow lacking the objectivity you need for, real scientific rigor. The stigma is baked into the system.
And I imagine that follows them throughout their entire career.
It absolutely does. And the barriers they evolve. Early on, researchers feel this intense pressure to overperform.
Just to counter any perceived deficit.
Exactly. Or they risk discrimination if they need a legitimate accommodation. And then for mid-career leaders, their actual competence can be scrutinized by colleagues based purely on a medical history that has nothing to do with their science.
Okay, so this is where the article makes this really core scientific pivot. Instead of just accepting that lived experience introduces bias, they argue the complete opposite. They say when it's paired with strong, rigorous methods, it provides something they call epistemic strength. What does that actually mean?
It just means strength of knowledge or validity. The lived experience doesn't just give you anecdotes, it challenges the fundamental assumptions of the science. It actually decreases your susceptibility to certain biases that you see in purely theoretical work because it's constantly demanding that the research be relevant to, genuine human experience, that it has to lead to real working solutions.
That is fascinating. Can you give us a concrete example of how that insight actually shifts the research in practice?
Sure. So these researchers are essential because they can challenge overly reductionistic models.
Okay.
The article gives the example of a researcher with lived experience of obsessive-compulsive disorder. They are developing new behavioral assays because they realized that current animal models, they only capture non-specific repetitive behaviors.
They miss the main point.
They miss the defining feature of OCD, the compulsive behaviors that are driven by these deep, distressing thoughts, the obsessions. That insider perspective is now directly improving the science. It's making it more accurate.
So what this all means for you, the listener, is that including these researchers just makes the science better. It's more robust, and it's far more relevant to real-world needs. The whole goal is to stop seeing them as just patients, and instead value their expertise to co-create knowledge. It's that principle, nothing about us without us.
And to make that happen, the focus has to shift. It can't just be about individuals fighting stigma. It has to be about structural reform.
So system-level changes.
Exactly. The authors recommend things like reforming application and hiring processes to prevent disclosure discrimination, developing dedicated funding for these researchers, and most importantly, fostering genuine power sharing in leadership positions. It has to go beyond tokenism.
So the ultimate takeaway here is that including researchers with lived experience, it's not about charity or meeting a quota.
Not at all.
It's a scientific imperative.
Yeah.
One that will produce better psychiatric neuroscience and, crucially, fairer and more equitable systems for everyone.
A transformation that benefits not just the researchers, but the entire patient community.
Thanks for listening to the DPN Deep Dive. Until next time.